Dan, I'm gonna be good at this. I'm gonna clap cheeks. Cheek clapping. What's going on, guys? It's your boy Distant Coder, and welcome back to another episode of answering your ruling questions. Don't forget, if you guys want to take part, leave your ruling questions in the comment section of this video, and you might make it into the next one. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So the first question of the day comes to us from Game Matt, and they're asking, "Hi Coder, my opponent activated Pot of Prosperity. Can I activate Dark Bribe later that turn?" So unfortunately, because your opponent has activated Pot of Prosperity, they have been locked out from being allowed to draw cards. Now, this is applied to them. However, neither player is able to make the player who activated Pot of Prosperity draw cards, be it by Dark Bribe, be it by Trickstar Reincarnation, and cards such as those. So because your opponent activated Pot of Prosperity, you are not legally allowed to activate cards like Dark Bribe, cards like Trickstar Reincarnation later in that turn. This next question comes to us from Zeus, and they ask, when is a special summon from hand considered an effect? Like, for example, why is a special summon of Swap Frog not considered an effect, but the one of Fire Flint Lady is? So basically, what you're looking at is the difference between an activated effect and an effect that is not an activated effect. So an effect that starts a chain or doesn't start a chain. The way that you know this is specifically by reading the card's text. You have to look for specific cues in the card's problem-solving card text. So what you're looking for are colons and semicolons. So anything that comes before a colon is the activation condition of a card, whereas anything that comes before a semicolon is the activation requirement and cost. If a card has a colon or a semicolon, it represents that the effect that you're trying to activate is an activated effect. Now, notice how Fire Flint Lady says, if you control a warrior monster, colon, which means that it is an activated effect, which is why Fire Flint Lady starts a chain, as opposed to a card such as Swap Frog that does not have a colon or a semicolon in its text, meaning that it simply is a special summon that does not start a chain by sending a water monster from hand to the graveyard. So you have to look for the cues in the card's text. So a colon or a semicolon will represent that the card does start a chain and is an activated effect, as opposed to if a card doesn't have a colon or a semicolon, it will not be an activated effect and will not start a chain. Okay, so this next ruling question comes to us from Dan Thompson, and they ask, with Prank Kid's Adamantipator being a strong rogue pick, I'd really like to know if you think Battle Butler gets its effect in Grave when tributed by a kaiju. So Prank Kid's Battle Butler has an effect that triggers when this card is sent from your field to the graveyard by an opponent's card. So not by an opponent's card effect, not when it's destroyed or something like that, simply if it's sent to the graveyard by an opponent's card. So what this means is that it doesn't specifically need to be sent to the graveyard via a card effect, such as like Raigeki, for example, or something like that. It simply needs to be sent to the graveyard by an opponent's card. When a card has text like that, a kaiju tributing it and sending it to the graveyard will trigger the effect of Prank Kid's Battle Butler. Same thing would apply with something like Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. If you do link summon using your opponent's Prank Kid's Battle Butler for Underworld Goddess, that will also trigger the effect of the opponent's Prank Kid's Battle Butler, because you are sending it to the graveyard with one of your own cards. No, it's not an effect. No, it's not like destroyed by battle or anything like that, but it is still considered to be sent to the graveyard by your card effect. Therefore, you will trigger your opponent's Prank Kid's Battle Butler if you kaiju over it. So, this next question comes to us from OP Blaziken, and they ask, hey Coder, I have a ruling question. If I crack down my opponent's monster and I use Book of Moon on it, will it still be affected by crackdown? So, there's two different instances that I think your question could be going for, so I'll just answer both of them. If your opponent activates crackdown targeting your monster and you chain Book of Moon targeting your own monster with the attempt to try and make crackdown not take your monster, that won't be successful. What'll happen is if you chain Book of Moon to Crackdown, the monster will be set face down, and then Crackdown will still apply to that monster and take control of it. So that is how Crackdown versus a chained Book of Moon interacts. Now, if you were asking, if you crack down a monster, your opponent takes it, and then afterwards you Book of Moon that monster, what happens? So if the monster is successfully taken by Crackdown, and then later on is set via the effect of Book of Moon, the effect of Crackdown will stop applying to it. However, the monster's control will not be switched. So if I take control of one of my opponent's monsters with Crackdown, and then I set that monster with like a Subterra Guru, for example, I get to keep their monster, and if I flip summon that monster later on, that monster can activate its effects, it can attack, it can be attacked by the opponent, and it will not return to my opponent's control. And the only other interesting thing about that is that in that scenario, the Crackdown will remain face up in the spell and trap zone, but will effectively no longer be targeting anything and won't be doing anything more than just staying there as like a dead card in the spell and trap zone. Poogers. So this next question comes to us from Logan Taylor, and they ask, if my opponent activates the grave effect of Meteona's Drytron to add itself back to the hand and targets one of their face-up Drytron monsters, and I chain Book of Moon and flip their monster face down, would they be able to add it back to hand? So the wording on Meteona's Drytron is that it targets one of your Drytron monsters, and then it reduces its attack in order to add itself back to the hand. For Meteona's Drytron to successfully add itself back from the graveyard, it needs to also successfully reduce the attack of that monster on the field. If you chain Book of Moon targeting the same monster that Meteona's Drytron targeted to reduce its attack to add itself back, it will not be able to reduce the attack of the monster that it targeted because that monster is now face down and does not have an attack value anymore. So for that reason, because Meteona's Drytron doesn't successfully reduce the attack of the monster that it targeted, it also doesn't successfully add itself back to the hand. So if you activate Book of Moon targeting the same card Meteona's Drytron targeted, you would effectively be forcing the Meteona's Drytron to resolve without effect and remain in the graveyard. Alright, this next question comes to us from AFJ, and they ask, what will happen if your opponent chains Lancia to my Allure of Darkness? So if you activate Allure of Darkness and your opponent chains Lancia to it, you are no longer allowed to banish cards. The way this interaction resolves is that your Allure of Darkness will still draw 2 cards, but because you cannot banish cards, what you need to do here is either reveal a dark monster in your hand that you would banish, but because you cannot banish, all you do is reveal a dark monster in hand and then you banish nothing. So you've essentially drawn 2 and you haven't gone the -1 of banishing a card. However, if you do not have any dark monsters in your hand to reveal, you'll still need to discard your hand via the effect of Allure of Darkness as you would if you didn't have a dark monster. So if they Lancia you, you draw 2, reveal a dark instead of banishing one, and then you get to keep your hand. If you don't have a dark, you discard your entire hand and you move on from there. Alright, this next question comes to us from Mario, and they ask, can you Ash Gossip Shadow? So the effect of Bamboozling Gossip Shadow is that if your opponent activates a monster effect, you can change that monster effect to both players draw 1 card. So the reason why you cannot Ash Gossip Shadow is similar to the reason why you cannot Ash Verte Anaconda. Verte Anaconda copies the effect of a fusion spell that you sent to the graveyard. Gossip Shadow changes the effect of a monster. So Gossip Shadow's effect itself does not make both players draw cards. It instead changes the effect of a monster on the field. And changing the effect of a monster whose effect activated is not something that Ash Blossom can negate. It's not something that is in the 3 bullet points that Ash Blossom can negate. So for that reason, because Ash Blossom cannot negate an effect that changes the effect of another monster, you cannot Ash Bamboozling Gossip Shadow in this scenario. Alright, this next question comes to us from J-Hop, and they ask, I activate the Drytron Alpha in hand. My opponent attempts to negate my Alpha with Dragoon. I chain Forbidden Droplet and send the Alpha I activated to negate Dragoon. Does the Alpha still summon, since it says it can special summon, in hand or graveyard? So, in this situation, the Drytron Alpha that you activated in the hand gets sent to the graveyard before the Alpha in hand resolves. So when a card moves from the hand to the graveyard or from one location to another, it is no longer considered to be the same physical copy of that card. So for this reason, because the Alpha that was in hand is now in the graveyard, it's not considered the same card. So the Drytron Alpha reads that it special summons this card from the hand or the grave. So because you discarded that same copy of Alpha, it is no longer this card because it's no longer the Drytron Alpha that was in the hand. It is now considered a different Drytron Alpha in the graveyard. So for this reason, if you do discard the Drytron Alpha with the effect of Forbidden Droplet, the Drytron Alpha in the graveyard will not successfully be able to summon itself in this scenario. Alright, this next question comes to us from Scarlet, and they ask, can I activate Dante under Dimensional Fissure since his effect does not mill monsters for cost, but cards in general? So under Dimensional Fissure, monsters cannot be sent to the graveyard, they will be banished instead. So in this scenario, you are not allowed to activate the effect of Dante, even though Dante could potentially just mill 3 spells, 3 traps, or any sort of combination of those two, because there is a possibility that Dante can mill monsters. You will not be able to activate the effect of Dante because monsters cannot be sent to the graveyard at all, so you would not successfully be able to pay the cost for Dante. So because there is a possibility that you won't be able to pay the cost successfully, you are not allowed to activate the effect of Dante in this given situation. And last but not least, we have a question coming from Jabbit, and they ask, if I activate Dragon Maid Tidying, targeting my Hieratic Spheres and an opponent's card, then I chain my Hieratic Spheres to it, how does it resolve? So essentially what they're asking is, if one of the 2 targets of Dragon Maid Tidying is no longer on the field when Tidying would resolve, does Tidying still return the other card that it targeted to the hand? So the wording on Dragon Maid Tidying is that it says, target 1 dragon you control and 1 card your opponent controls, return them to the hand. So in any given situation where a card says return them or destroy them, such as a card like Breaksword for example, it does not need to still have all of its targets still there in order to resolve. So as long as at least one of the targets are still in the location where they were when they were targeted, the card will still resolve successfully. So if you activate Dragon Maid Tidying, targeting one of your dragon monsters and a card your opponent controls, and your dragon monster leaves the field before the Tidying would resolve, it'll still return that opponent's card that you targeted to the hand because it says targeted, return them to the hand, as opposed to return both or return those targets and wording such as that. So the wording is very important. If it said return both to the hand, you have to return either both or neither, but because it says return them, it will still successfully return the one that you target on the opponent's field, even though yours is no longer on your field to be returned as well. So anyways guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and I hope you guys learned something new. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and leave your ruling questions in the comment section of this video. I will go over those for the rulings of my next video. So anyways guys, I'm going to see you guys in the next video. Hope you all have an excellent day. Peace!